Okay. Well, today we're going to continue working on the speaking section, and we'll work on question 3 of the speaking section, the one we saw yesterday. Yesterday, we took a look at the theory behind the third question. We saw the format, we saw some examples of the topics, we saw like the template, the structure of the response, and today we will be practicing, mainly practicing. Do you have the template ready for this question?
Yes, I have it.
Okay, perfect, because we're going to be needing it today. So in that case, you know what to do. You get the reading first. It's an academic passage where they show you a title first and they define that concept. It's a definition of a concept. You need to look for the definition, copy the title, and then you will hear in the lecture 1 or 2 examples about the same concept. And your job is to explain a concept using the examples. Do you have any questions before we start today's practice session?
No.
Okay, perfect. Then let's start practicing. This is going to be the first question we do. Remember that you have 45 seconds to read the passage.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class. Okay, so this comes up a lot when people make career decisions. A friend of mine from college always wanted to be a film reviewer. He was a film major and he loved movies. Most of all, he loved to write about movies. So when he graduated, he looked for a job as a film reviewer for a newspaper because, as a film reviewer, he'd get to see films for free and would be paid to write about them. That's what he loved. But he couldn't find a job as a film reviewer. So he took a position as a news reporter instead for a newspaper, investigating stories, writing about events, what news reporters do. Now, at first, my friend wasn't sure he'd be any good at this. He'd never been a news reporter before. But eventually, he adjusted and gained confidence, and he got used to the job. And he realized he was actually a pretty good reporter. Anyway, here's the thing. After a few years, the film reviewer for the newspaper where he worked quit, and my friend was offered her job. This was his dream, right? His opportunity to be a film reviewer had finally come. And the new job would actually pay more, too. But did he take the job? Nope, he turned it down. He told me he'd gotten used to being a news reporter, and he just didn't want to try something else. It seemed like too big of a change since, there was a chance that the new job might not work out.
Now, using the example from the lecture, explain the comfort zone bias. You will now have 30 seconds to prepare your response. Okay. So please, you may begin speaking now.
According to the lecture, comfort zone bias occurs when people are used or are happy in familiar situations and avoid unfamiliar situations because of they prefer not to take risks. For example, the professor, or in the lecture, the professor gives the example of a person that studied to be a film reviewer, or he planned to work in that area because that person loved movies. But he couldn't find this job, and instead he was hired as a news reporter. He was good at this, and he gained confidence and experience. And after years, he was offered the film review position, but he didn't get it because he was gotten used to the old job.
Okay, exactly. It's not that he didn't get it, right? But he didn't take it.
Yes, he didn't take it.
Okay, good. So I would say that was a great response. Your definition was correct. When people are so used to familiar situations, they are so, used to, that would be the word, that they don't want to enter unfamiliar ones, right? So the tendency of remaining in their comfort zones. And the way you explained the example was really good as well. But maybe what I would say is try to summarize information a little bit more, focus on what is the most important part, right? How this person turned down his dream job, what he always wanted to be a film reviewer, because he was so used to working as a news reporter, right? Even though that wasn't what he wanted, he was used to it and he preferred to stay there rather than entering an unfamiliar situation. Always focus on the most important information, which tends to be the last part of the example, like the reflection, the resolution. So careful there, maybe skip a couple of details so that you can get to that part and maybe draw that connection, right, between the concept and the example. Also use a couple of transitions here and there to try to replace, instead of but he couldn't get it, only however he couldn't get the job as a film reviewer. Therefore, he took a position as a news reporter. Afterwards, he was offered the job. Nevertheless, he didn't take it since he was used to working as a news reporter, right? So those transitions, those connectors will also help your speech. It was good though. Maybe those tips will be what I could say, but overall, it was a nice response.
Okay, thank you. I will try to do it.
Okay, perfect. Let's do this one here now, sociobiology. You will now have 45 seconds to read the text.
Now listen to part of a lecture on this topic in a zoology class.
Let's start with an example you may be familiar with. What's one thing dogs typically do when they feel threatened, when they want to protect themselves? That's right, they show their teeth. And when we see this, we know this behavior means basically stay away. Now, here's how this behavior became a recognizable warning. A long time ago, a dog sensing danger would get ready to bite whatever animal was threatening it. It started by baring its teeth, but the purpose of doing this was something very simple, The dog instinctively was making sure it wouldn't bite its own lips when it bit the other animal, okay? But what happened? Other dogs, other animals, over time, they learned that this teeth-baring always came before a dog was going to bite. And so they started to read it as a signal to be careful, to keep away or risk getting bitten. This scenario, repeated time after time, also led to the dog's awareness that by simply showing its teeth, a lot of the time that was protection enough. What had been a simple physical preparation to bite had developed into a kind of defense mechanism in and of itself. The dog learned it did not need to actually attack, but could get the right result from just communicating the possibility of an attack through showing its teeth. It started to use this behavior as a warning signal.
Now explain the concept of ritualization using the example of dogs discussed by the professor. You will have 30 seconds now to prepare your response. Okay. So please, you may begin now.
According to the lecture, ritualization is a behavior or form of communication that animals use in order to protect themselves. In the lecture, the professor talks about the example of dogs that when they feel threatened, they show their teeth in order to give a warning and to tell the humans or the people or the animals that threaten them to stay away. So he says that this behavior with years, the dogs learn to just to communicate, showing the teeth instead of biting the people, and just to give a warning.
Okay, good. So what I could say, I mean, everything was really good. Maybe the information was not as accurate as it could have been. So you said in your definition that ritualization is when animals, an animal behavior that animals use to protect themselves, right? That communicate a message to protect themselves. But I think that there was more than that. So ritualization is when the purpose of a behavior changes over time. There was a behavior that originally had a practical purpose and that turns into a communicative behavior, right? So it's the process of the purpose of the behavior changing. It originally had a practical purpose and not changed into a communicative purpose. And you just focus on the communicative part, right? And if you understand the definition well, then that will make you understand the example better as well. Because the example was about dogs showing their teeth to communicate a message, that's true. But the professor explains that it wasn't always like that. In the beginning, dogs used to do this when they were preparing to bite, and they didn't want to bite their lips, right? They didn't want to bite their own lips, so that's why they opened their mouth and showed their teeth, so in order not to bite themselves. That was the practical purpose. But over time, as you said, other dogs learned that this was something that dogs did before biting, and other animals as well learned the same. And that also came to the dog's awareness. And that behavior that had a practical purpose of not biting themselves turned into just a communicative behavior, right? And dogs now do this because they just wanna communicate the message of stay away, right? So careful. Make sure that you always read the text very carefully. Most of the time, in this case, it says it's called ritualization, right? So some communicative behavior in animals is developed through a process called ritualization. So ritualization isn't just the communicative behavior, it's the process. And maybe you needed to continue reading, right? The process of the behavior change. So just that, content most of it. Is that okay? Any questions,
Yes.
comments?
Now it's all clear.
Okay. So let's work on another one. It will be the same. You have 45 seconds to read the text.
Now listen to part of a lecture on this topic in a psychology class. For example, I recently read about a case in which a researcher was given two groups of monkeys, and he was asked to train these monkeys to pick up a ball and put it in a box. And he was told to record how many hours it took to train each monkey to learn to do this. Now, before he started the training, the researcher was told that one group of monkeys was highly intelligent and that the other group was less intelligent. In truth, there was no difference between them. All the monkeys were actually very similar in terms of intelligence, but the researcher didn't know that. He thought one group was smarter, so he expected that that group would be easier to train. So, what happened? Well, the researcher trained the monkeys to perform the action, and it turned out that, on average, it took him 2 hours less time to train the supposedly smart monkeys than the supposedly less intelligent monkeys. Why? Well, it turns out that with the supposedly smart monkeys, the researcher smiled at them a lot, gave them a lot of encouragement, talked to them a lot, worked hard to communicate with them. But with the monkeys he thought were less intelligent, he wasn't as enthusiastic. He didn't try quite as hard. Wasn't quite as optimistic.
So explain how the example from the professor's lecture illustrates the experiment effect. You now have 30 seconds to prepare your response. Okay, so please, you can start now.
According to the passage, experiment effect is defined or occurs when experiment is being carried out and the researcher's expectations affect the results of the experiment. So in the lecture, the professor gives the example of a researcher that was given two groups of monkeys and that needed to do a specific activity. And the researcher had to count the hours of this activity. So the truth was that these groups of monkeys had the same intelligence, but the researcher maybe give more activities. No, was more, nah, sorry. I couldn't organize my idea.
Okay, don't worry about it. You could try again, but focus always on the most important part, right? How you can even skip the details. You don't necessarily have to go in chronological order, right? When you mentioned the definition. So when the researcher's expectations affect the outcome of the experiment. So in this example that the professor gives, first focus on what was the researcher's expectations, right? The research expected one group of monkeys to be smarter than the other because he was told that, right? Even though that wasn't true. So that affected, so why did it affect the experiment? Therefore, he put more effort into training that group. And how did it affect the experiment? Because it turned out that, in fact, it did take him less time to train that group of monkeys, right? Even though they were all the same. So work within the definition, right? And you can start kind of start going from there, looking for the information from the example according to what you have in your definition. So that way you don't have to go step by step. So first, there was an experiment done by a researcher. Then the researcher was told that one group of monkeys was smarter than the other. The researcher had to train the monkeys to put a ball into a box. So if you go in order, you're gonna waste a lot of time, and maybe you will not make it on time to explain the most important part. Okay, so I will give you 30 more seconds to prepare to your response, and then you can go again.
Okay.
Okay, so please, you can go now.
According to the passage, experiment effect occurs when the expectations of a researcher influences and affect the results of an experiment. So in the lecture, the professor gives example of experiment that was done with two groups of monkeys. These two groups had the same intelligence, but the researcher was told that one group was smarter than the other one. So he was more optimistic with the most intelligent one. Uh, so what happened was that this group had better results in the experiment because he had those expectations, and so his expectations affected the result of the experiment.
Okay, great. That was better. That was better. And I really like that last part, that conclusion that you had, connecting the connecting the main idea, right? The definition with the example. It was really good. Again, some transitions here and there. Try to always get used to replacing those so, but, and that will give your response a little more structure. But it was good. Thank you, Christian.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Let's do another one. Okay, let's do this one now. Remember, you have 45 seconds to read the text.
Now listen to part of a lecture on this topic in a business management class. Okay, so we've been talking about starting a business. Let's say I want to open up a pizza restaurant. Well, I know how tough it is to make a new business succeed, and I want a sure thing. So I contact a big company that owns a chain of pizza places. Let's say it's called Pizza Town, and I pay for the rights to call my restaurant Pizza Town and to sell Pizza Town's special one-of-a-kind pizza. Now, since everyone's heard of Pizza Town, it's really popular, I don't have to worry about whether people will want to eat my pizza or not. I already know this pizza will sell well because it's a known thing, and that means that there's a better chance my business will succeed. Now, in exchange for being able to call my restaurant Pizza Town, I have to agree to run the business the Pizza Town way, and Pizza Town trains me to do this. They show me how to do everything. How to make my pizzas taste like Pizza Town pizzas, how to advertise, even how to make my store look like a Pizza Town. Now, this means that I don't have a lot of freedom or choice in the way I run my business. But in a lot of ways, this is great for me. After all, Pizza Town's way generally works. They sell a lot of pizza.
Now, using the example given by the professor, explain how franchising works. You now will have 30 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay. So maybe Carolina, would you go? Are you there, Carolina? Okay, so Christian, please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. According to the passage, franchising occurs when stores or business buy the right to use the company's name of a big company. So the professor gives example of a pizza restaurant. So when you want to open a restaurant, a new restaurant like this one, you can buy the right to use the name of a big company or a popular. As a result of this, you don't have to worry to sell because you reduce the risk because it is a well-known company. However, you don't have freedom or choices. But you can sell a lot because it is a well-known company.
Okay, great. So you have explained perfectly well how franchising works. Everything was said, but you forgot to mention the example, right? About the pizza restaurant, Pizza Town. So you need to use that example. So tell me, everything you said you was good, but using the example. So according to the reading, franchising is when a company pays for the right to use a big company's name, or a big company's name, right? Lecture, the professor gives the example of a restaurant that wants to sell pizza. They could pay for the right to use the name of Pizza Town, which is a much bigger pizza restaurant. And you explain everything you said, right? You have to do everything in the way that the original or the main company tells you to. So you have to put your restaurant in that way. You have to sell your pizza in the same way. So use that example, right? That's the only thing. Don't forget to use the example. Is that okay?
Okay, yes. Thank you.
Okay, of course. So let's do this one here. You have 45 seconds to read the text.
Now listen to part of a lecture on this topic in an environmental science class. So, one example of this is the macaw, the great green macaw. Now, the great green macaw is a beautiful bird, a fairly large-sized parrot known for its colorful feathers, gorgeous green feathers with some red and blue feathers too. The macaw lives in the South American rainforest, in a part of the rainforest where a lot of trees had been cut down, trees that the macaw relies on for its food and nesting. So, the macaw was in trouble. And, of course, along with the trees, a lot of other animals were in trouble too. Lots of birds, bats, and frogs also lived in these trees. So, when the trees were cut down and cleared away, these animals also didn't have a place to live anymore, and their populations drastically declined. So, what a concerned group of people in the area did was they started spreading the word about how the macaw, this really beautiful bird, needed help. They made little books with information about the macaw, with pictures, full-colored pictures of the macaw that showed off its beautiful feathers. And they passed out these little books, these informational brochures. They distributed them to people in schools and community centers in the area. And a lot of people responded. They contributed money and helped the group set up some protected land, a special area where no one could cut down the trees, so the macaw would be safe. And the macaw's population started to increase, and other birds and bats and frogs came back to the area too. Their numbers increased along with the trees.
Okay. So, using the example of the macaw from the lecture, explain the concept of a flagship species. You will now have 30 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay. So, Christian, please, you can go.
According to the passage, flagship species are attractive species that are used to represent an endangered area, to raise public awareness, and to support or to protect that threatened area. In the lecture, the professor gives the example of a macaw species, which is a beautiful bird that live in the South American rainforest that was threatened because many trees were cut down, and this species was in trouble also with other ones like frogs. So these populations declined as a result of the trees cut down. And so the people prepare books with pictures distributed to communities, and the people uh, raised funds in order to protect this area.
Exactly. People raised funds, raised awareness using the image of the macaque to represent all of the other animals as well, right? The entire area. Right. Great. I think that was a really good response. Loved your definition. You explained the example well as well. I think I wouldn't make any comments, any changes to your response. It was good. Don't forget the transitions, but it was a great response, Christian.
Okay, thank you.
Hey guys, let's do another one. Do you have any questions, any comments so far?
No.
All right, so let's hear this one. Let's see. Okay. So listen now to the
Now listen to part of a lecture from a sociology class. Now, the invention of the telephone was revolutionary. It was a much easier and faster way of communicating than anything else available at the time. However, when the telephone first became widely available towards the end of the 19th century, only businesses used telephones because businesses realized how the telephone could benefit them, how it could help them be more productive. But a lot of people in the general public didn't think the phone should be used for personal communication. Some people didn't like to listen to someone's voice without being able to see them. Also, a lot of people thought that it was rude to call someone on the telephone instead of visiting them in person. They missed the sense of personal connection they got from meeting someone. However, as we all know, people gradually changed their minds about the telephone. It took about 30 years, but eventually most homes came to have telephones, and everyone came to depend on them. Talking to someone you couldn't see began to seem more and more normal. Friends began to call each other just to chat, and just for fun. And after everyone agreed on certain rules of politeness, such as not calling someone late at night, no one considered it rude anymore to make personal phone calls.
Okay. So using the example of the telephone, explain the concept of cultural lack. You will now have 30 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay. So, Christian, please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
According to the passage, cultural lack occurs when the technology changes occur really fast, and people have a period of time to adjust to these changes. And at the beginning, they have a bad attitude. So in the lecture, the professor explains with the example of the telephone. When at the beginning, when it appeared, only businesses used it, and people didn't like it because they didn't like maybe the voice or the voice of another person, or they thought that they can lose personal connection. But after some years, like 30 years, they changed their minds, and people got used to the normal use, like friends used to chat it, and they.
Okay, great. So yes, you explained it really well. It's that period of adjusting to a technological change. And the example of the telephone, right? Initially, people didn't like it. They thought it was rude. It was losing a way of losing personal connection, but eventually they adjust. So great explanation. No comments. Just your transitions, and also look at the timer, right? So that you don't get cut off when you're speaking. That's good. Well
Okay,
done.
yes, thank you.
Let's see. Okay, let's do this one now. It will be the same, 45 seconds for you guys to read the text.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a sociology class on this topic.
I have an example from my own life that illustrates this. When I first began my university studies, I became friends with a bunch of art students. They were older and fun and very creative, and I thought they were really cool. And they all liked to dress really casually, in t-shirts and jeans and sneakers. That's what they wore all the time, to class, to the library, to dinner, everywhere. T-shirts and jeans and sneakers. So that's what I started wearing too. And I fit right in, and I felt really cool. But then I graduated, moved to Chicago, and got a job. And I started working with some really bright young people who'd already been working at the company for a few years, who were already handling major responsibilities for the company. Really impressive. And sometimes some of us would get together on the weekends, maybe for a concert or a baseball game or something. And at first, I just wear a t-shirt and jeans and sneakers. That was, how I was used to dressing. But I soon noticed that my coworkers preferred to dress up a little bit. The men would wear a nice pair of pants, a button-up shirt. The women might wear a fashionable dress and some nice shoes. They dressed in clothes a lot nicer than what I was used to wearing. And I started thinking, that looks really classy, really sharp. And so I started to dress the same way they did, nicer, a little more formal. And I don't know, somehow my t-shirt and jeans and sneakers didn't seem as cool to me anymore.
Okay, so using the example from the lecture, explain how people's behavior affected by wearing skirts. You will now have 30 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay. Your question, please. You can go now.
According to the passage, reference groups are groups of people that are that influence the thinking and behavior of individuals, or that are used to imitate. So in the lecture, the professor gives an example of his own life. He says that in the university, he used to have time with art students who were creative and cool. They used to wear casual clothes like jeans and sneakers. So he also used to wear like that because he think that that was cool. But after many years, when he used to work in another company, he saw that other people used to wear formal clothes like pants, and he changed his clothes. So this reference group influenced the way he used to out.
Exactly. Okay. Influence the way that he used to dress, right? In different times of his life. Great.
Yeah.
I mean, just don't forget to look at the timer. But you're doing a great job, Christian. Well, what do you think? What would you, is there anything that you would change from your response?
I think maybe the structure, or just try to do it. Try to summarize it better.
So yes, summarizing it is important. You don't necessarily, as I told you, have to go in chronological order, right? You could say, in the lecture, the professor gives the example of how in different parts of his life, different reference groups affected his way of dressing. When he was young, on one hand, he used to hang out with a bunch of art students and that he thought was really cool. So he used to dress like them, very casual. However, when he moved to Chicago and started working for a company, his reference group changed, right? And started to be his coworkers. Therefore, he started to dress the same way they did, more formally, and you could maybe give some details, right? He started to wear pants and a shirt. So that way, right? You don't necessarily have to go in the same order. Maybe that. That was good though.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, so let's do this one here. You have 45 seconds to read the text.
Now listen to a lecture from a marketing class.
Okay, so I've actually got a few different examples of this. You know, when I was a kid, a character named Action Hero was really popular with my friends and me. We would always watch the Action Hero program on television every week and play games, pretending that we were as strong and powerful as he was. Then pretty soon we began seeing these small Action Hero figures in all the stores. And, well, we all just had to have them. I mean, we'd been watching the television show for so long that it seemed only natural to want to own the toys, too. Well, I finally grew up and left the Action Hero television program and toys behind. But now I have a 7-year-old daughter who watches television a lot and also likes to play with her toys. And lately her favorite toy is a cute little baby doll with a big round face and lots of curly hair named Rosa. All my daughter's friends have Rosa dolls too, and they enjoy going to each other's houses to play with them. Then a few weeks ago, my daughter came running up to me all excited because she had just heard there was going to be a new television program on every week with the doll, Rosa, as the main character. So naturally, she and all her friends have begun watching the show, and it's already very popular as the toy doll.
Okay. Using the examples from the lecture, explain the concept of entertainment merchandising. You will now have 30 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay. So please, Christian, you can start speaking now.
According to the passage, entertainment and merchandising is when a brand or image of a product is used to sell another product. In the lecture, the professor gives two examples. The first one is when he was a kid, he used to play with a popular hero with his friends because it was a popular TV program. And some days or sometime after that, this hero was sold in many stores because it became so popular. Additionally, he gives the example of her daughter that also has a favorite toy. It is a baby doll. She likes that, and after some days, it also became popular, and it appeared a TV program about it.
Okay, good. A TV program appeared, right? So the TV program used the image of the product of the toy to create a new product, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So no comments. Well done. I like the structure. I like the transition you use. Additionally, he gives the example of. So it was a really well structured. Your definition was right on point, using the image of a product to sell another one. And your grammar was really good as well. You know, just the usual. Work on is avoiding some details. Maybe you could cross out a few of the details from your notes. But it was a great response, I would say overall.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Christian. So what do you guys think? Do you have any questions, any comments now that we practice question 3? How do you feel about this question so far? You guys? So, well, if you don't have questions, then please don't forget to fill out today's survey. And I will see you guys next class, which is going to be on Tuesday next week. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll continue working on the speaking section. We have one more question 4 to work on Tuesday. So I will see you guys then.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye. Have a nice week.
Sure.